Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to another video. Why the hell did I just show a clip of Lord of the Rings? Well, because a friend linked me it, and then I realized it had been linked on Reddit as well. This could be what warriors become. Oh yes, so today came out revealing the next profession that we're covering is warrior. And while this doesn't give us any mind-blowing new amount of information, it does reveal one important thing, and that is the fact that this elite specialization will be getting the torch. And combining this with a lot of other information we've had around and about, you can actually come to, I think, some fairly good conclusions about where perhaps this class could be. So I'm here to talk about that with you guys. First of all, just in the image, as I said, there's not much information. They also do reveal the unique profession armor, it seems, and that would be the helmet. Which is this here, and I don't believe we've seen anywhere. Interestingly as well, the torch itself, which we've got lots of discussion to do, has a bunch of bears around it. And that's curious to me. Maybe it's just because this is a Norn character we're seeing, but I would hazard that every single warrior who elite specializes and finishes the reward track will actually end up getting this same torch. There was data mining a while ago from that shaman showing this thing, which easily could have been druid related, but now that we see the bears or whatever on the torch, I wonder whether maybe this is instead warrior related. To talk about the name for a second, it was data mined for a while ago. I covered this in a video, but maybe you missed it. The warrior elite specialization name was data mined, and this seemed to be Berserker. It came with some art among all the art that we got when we saw, for example, Glint and Shiro before they were actually revealed. Berserker seems to work very well, and I like the idea of a warrior elite specialization that really ties into this crazy Bulls Rush Frenzy 100 Blades playstyle that has become less and less of a thing for warriors. You know, at launch, everyone was trying to play like that, and there was this era about warriors that they could be super classy, and now we kind of just see them for their innate tankiness and their utility while still being able to pump out massive amounts of damage. So I do like the idea of just having this crazy glassy, massively offensive warrior. Maybe the elite specialization will have that angling. I'm going to do a bit of a discussion on that in a second, but with that angling, Berserker seems like a great name. With the data mining, the old data mining, Berserker seems like a great name. It seems to be what they're going with. At the end of this video, I'm going to talk about some more data mining too, where some traits have been mined, specifically referencing the idea of berserking stuff. So it seems like an incredibly likely name. However, with all of that said, I do think we should remain at least a little bit open to the thought that it's not going to be the name. It seems very unlikely that it will be anything else, but there is a chance it won't be Berserker. And the reason I say that is mostly because of the stat type. As you are all familiar, the main stats most people run in PvE, which is arguably the biggest game type for Guild Wars 2, are Berserker stats. Berserker stats also see use in World vs. World, and they see use in PvP. It's probably the most prevalent stat type we see across all professions and all modes, like all summed up in general. Berserker stuff. And so then to give an elite specialization that uses the exact same name is perhaps a confusion they might not want to inflict upon new people in the franchise. Now, for me and you, that's going to sound really basic and stupid, but I just don't think they like the idea of, oh, I'm a Berserker warrior, and okay, what stats do I run? Oh, you run Berserker stats. Yeah, but I know that. I'm already a Berserker. You're like, these are unlikely to be conversations they want people to have. So keep an open mind about Berserker, maybe. There's undoubtedly going to be a Berserking mode to the class, though, especially given the recent data mines we'll get to soon. So who knows? Other potentials, just in case we're not satisfied. Barbarian, I think, is also a very likely name that I personally enjoy a lot of. Specifically the fact that now we know it has Torch, and Barbarians, you tend to think of people running around pillaging, raiding places, and burning villages down. Not that I necessarily think that this is going to be an evil inclined profession. I think they want all of the heroes of Tyria to be happy-go-lucky, even the Revenant, who is kind of supposed to be that Death Knight, Dark Knight archetype. They were like, oh no, but you got some nice heroes with you as well, and you can make yourself all happy and about bunnies and so forth. I doubt they're ever going to make, this horrible, aggressive, evil style guy, but I think Barbarian is a fairly likely name too. There's also going to be a lot of discussion in this video about the idea of the warrior burning themselves and harming themselves, again, to tap into this kind of glassy idea, they hurt themselves, as World of Enders put it, to increase their adrenaline. I really like that idea. I think that could be a thing. The German information they released about this specialization as well said something to that effect, like, as the fires burn, the fury inside me gets the adrenaline going. I think if that's going to be an angle, we could see something kamikaze-wise for the name. I mean, it seems very likely they could have looked at this character from Lord of the Rings, alright, and been like, yeah, this could be really cool, and taken their inspiration there. For what it's worth, I believe those enemies, as I just read on Reddit, in Lord of the Rings were actually called Berserkers too, which is kind of curious. Alright, so let's move on and talk about the torch itself. Now, as a weapon, I think it does make sense for the warrior. I think some warriors are going to be a little bit disappointed. You guys will know I openly speculated for a long time that they could be getting dagger. Dagger made sense to me because if you like look at the crafting disciplines, it's kind of a weaponsmithing thing, and warriors were always great wielders of many of these iron forged weapons, and they kind of had all of them, and dagger was the one thing they didn't have. So I like the idea of them getting these daggers and really keying further into this idea that the warriors are the masters of all martial weaponry. But torch makes a lot of sense too. Dagger has some thematic issues. There were a lot of warriors who didn't even like the idea. A lot of us think of like subterfuge and sneakiness when we think of daggers, even though necessarily it doesn't have to be an element of that weapon. And definitely that doesn't fit the warrior, even in terms of an elite specialization that can change it somehow, like what its core themes are. As for getting an offhand instead of a main hand, warriors already have a lot of main hands. As I said with the Tempest stuff, an offhand can, in theory, open up a lot more in terms of playstyles and have some more prominent effects attached to it. And I think even as developers as well, they probably want to get a bunch of offhands done now. You know, they're quite late into it now. If they're still really actively developing and just conceiving and deciding what they want these elite specializations to be, there must have been a point where they were like, oh, okay, we can't give everyone like a new two-hander. Oh, we can't even give everyone like a one-hander because we just want less skills to design. They're more piecemeal. They're easier to balance around. They're less to have to figure out and implement in the engine. Basically, it's less work, and because they're doing such a huge slew here, probably on a shorter time scale than they'll be given for future expansions where they can be working on them for longer periods of time. So I think, you know, all these things could have rolled into Torch. Mechanically, Torch can offer some very important stuff to warriors too. So what I want to do first is look at the Torch for other classes. The other important thing about Torch is, as Warhorn was with Tempest, it's a very underrepresented weapon in the game right now. And I think it makes sense to give two of your most played classes, that being the warrior, that being the elementalist, offhands that aren't very well represented. And so, obviously, with Tempest, we got Warhorn for that reason, and there's a bit of disappointment there from people, but Ellie was already in a great place, and same goes for Warrior. But so, there's only 3 classes before this elite specialization comes in the game that even use the Torch. I'm going to go with the most niche, interesting one first, just to demonstrate to you guys how this has been used in the engine so far. That's Mesmer. Now, they have the most unique ways of using it. Their skill 4 is a stealth and a blast finisher. It's called the Prestige. It's one of my favorite Mesmer skills, even though I don't really like stealth gameplay being too prevalent in the game, and it's a huge part of being like a PU Mesmer. This is a really fun skill though. You vanish with the torch, and when you reveal yourself later, you burn everyone around you for very significant condition damage if you're spec'd that way, and you blast finish at the end. So it's great in PvE when you're blasting stealth to skip trash. It's great in Wild versus Wild for roaming. It's great anywhere you want stealth, and it's even good on condition specs. You know, these are 3 things that made PU quite a mighty build in 1v1s. Then you've got the skill 5. Skill 5, I think of all the skills in all of Guild Wars 2, is a skill that I see how amazing it could be, and I'm disappointed that it is not as amazing as it could be. It was inspired by Backfire of GW1, one of the best skills, one of my favorite all-time skills of this franchise. You summon a Phantasm that applies retaliation with its projectiles to allies and confusion to enemies. So the idea is, with this guy out, enemies, if they try and do stuff, they take lots of damage. But until retaliation, for example, scales with intensity instead of duration, and until there's serious tweaking on the skill, that Phantasm's like really unfun to use. So that's the way that the Mesmer uses the Torch. Let's look at the most generic standard way you'd imagine a torch to be used, and that's on the Ranger. Now, the Ranger's got a skill 4 that they can just throw it. This got buffed recently to have like a really high range. It's good burning stack. Since the condition changes, this is a really fun skill, as basic as you can get. Just apply burning to someone. And the skill 5 is a totally bonkers, insane AoE for burning damage, and of course it is a fire field, and this is where Rangers get a lot of their utility in PvE. The ability to have a fire field is huge. It means you can really play into this blasting might playstyle that is obviously oh so important right now. And once again, we see Rangers who spec themselves for some condition damage, maybe trap builds. They do massive damage with this ability, so it's really, really great. Lastly, quickly, to go through Guardian. Guardian's obviously a class that has more of a support angle. The skill 5, therefore, is Cleansing Flame, and you breathe onto the torch, spreading it everywhere in this nice blue fire, and it's supposed to remove conditions from allies. It's a bit clunky, doesn't work super well, but that's what the 5 is. And the 4 is seeing a lot of use as well since the condition damage changes that it never did before. This has 2 components. Number 1, it sets yourself on fire, and then number 2, then it toggles into a new ability where you can throw it a lot like the Ranger can throw their torch, and you can apply burning to people. and a lot of stacks at that. So these are the skills currently in game, and what we need to focus on when we look at this is, does the fact that these already exist make it less likely that the warrior could get it? Because if you think about it, warrior could totally just get the Guardian 4, set himself on fire, you know, for this adrenaline idea and key into this kind of glassy notion, and then they could get the skill 5 from Ranger, which is another fire field. Now, Warrior does already have fire fields, and when you consider the developer's balance from a PvP perspective, where Longbow has always had a fantastic place in PvP, they might be thinking, you know, Warrior's already got great fire field access, we don't really need to do that, so maybe you won't see them get a fire field. And then the idea that the Guardians are already setting themselves on fire, what, are they just going to copy-paste that idea for an elite specialization? Are people really going to be happy with that? Even if it is another, like, rotating skill type thing. So I'm just not sure how they're going to tackle Torch. I do think there'll be some self-damage style stuff in there, but I don't think it's going to be as basic as the Guardians methods. Maybe it could be a bit more explosive, as we see, you know, with this Lord of the Rings guy. It may be a bit easier to speculate when we start to wonder, what even is the angling of this elite specialization? Is it fair to think that it's going to be, you know, just more damage at the cost of glassiness and damaging yourself? Is that not something that is should only be belonging, for example, to necromancers? Does that mean that the utility skill type we may be seeing on this warrior elite specialization is corruptions of some kind? You know, they do a variety of different things themselves with a torch, and it's very ritualistic and tribal. But here's something I can say. I doubt that we'll see a frontline supporter on this elite specialization. I say that because we've already seen that exact playstyle keyed into very heavily with the Tempest and with the Herald. With two of the elite specializations, there is room for this kind of support. Maybe not frontline support, but there is the definite thematic room for this supporty style thing in the Druid too, and even elements of the Dragon Hunter, when you look at the way that their Aegis has changed and so forth now, also offer that kind of approach. So I don't think we're going to see that. The idea of a really big hitter as well has already kind of been addressed with the Reaper. That's not to say they couldn't do it again, though the Warrior already has elements of that as it is. So I also doubt that. The one thing I don't think we've seen in huge abundance with the new elite specializations, or specifically targeted by the devs, is the idea of a condition damage character. And as you can see from all of these other torch skills I've already shown, there's a lot of condition damage associated with Torch as a weapon. Now, they might try and flip that on the head, and they might say, yeah, it's traditionally a lot of Condi. We're going to make this huge flat power and explosions and change it in that regard. At the moment as well, if you want to go like a pure condition damage warrior, you know, sword's very easy to do. That's fantastic Condi. But then for your other set, sometimes you're kind of wondering. Sometimes you're left, what do I want to do? You know, I think a lot of warriors then just go like Sword Warhorn. In PvP, obviously Longbow is great, but even then, all someone has to do is move out of your fire field and dodge pin down, and there you go. So maybe they're going to give like a complementary other offhand for condition damage, but I'm not sure how many warriors would be happy with that either. So it's a tricky one for me. You know, it'd be unfair to say that Warrior's not already good at condition damage. Let's have a quick talk about the profession mechanic. Now, a long time ago, when they very first showed us off Verdant Brink in a stream, we did see them playing on a warrior. This was the same one where we saw some early Shiro Revenant stuff, though we didn't know it at the time. And this warrior did have an F2 on their skill bar. Now, this was a long time ago, though, like a long time ago. It was months and months after that, we got data mining about Sword Tempests, and then months later, we actually had Tempests, and Sword had nothing to do with it. So does this persist? I'm unsure. I think, though, it does make a lot of sense. You can do a lot of cool things with F2. The most extreme example that I absolutely don't think is going to happen is you give people an alternate burst skill to activate. So no longer, when you have a longbow, do you just have a fire field, but you have, you know, that original longbow burst skill that had a completely ridiculous effect. They bring back to the game, and that's your F2, and you can choose which one you want. While you're wielding an axe, you don't just have Eviscerate, you have, you know, another version of Skullcrack or something. I don't think that's going to happen. It's way too much effort. They're not going to design that many skills. It reduces the purity of purpose on those weapons. I don't see it happening. One idea that I always really liked was the thought that the F2 was the burst skill on your other weapon set. Okay, so picture this. You have Axe, alright, because you're crazy and you just love the way it feels, even though it's not great, and you desperately want it to work. You've got Axe on one set, and on your alternate swap, you have Longbow. You're currently wielding the Axe, and you get max adrenaline. Now you've got the option, do you F1 for eviscerate or do you F2 for pin down? And if you choose to press F2 for pin down, it will instantly swap you to the longbow cast pin down regardless of your weapon swap cooldown. So this again plays into that idea that Warrior is really good with multiple weapons, and they kind of play between these dances. It opens up a lot of different combos. For Warriors, it means that you don't always have to have fast hands. I've always really liked that idea. Last of all, and I think this is probably the most likely one, especially given data mining, though it doesn't excite me the most. What if whenever you press F2, it will swap you into another mode? This would be a berserker mode, and that's what I'm going to talk about with data mining in just a second. Mechanically, this would end up feeling a lot like Death Shroud or just Shroud in general for Necromancers, except without the health pool mechanic on there. And perhaps while you're wielding the torch, you're taking massive damage or something, but getting huge amounts of adrenaline. And it's like this thing, almost like a kit you would be swapping into. I could maybe see them doing that, though. Again, it's not the one that excites me the most. Now, as for the utility skill type, I did do a video in which I talked a whole bunch about this, but when I finished, I realized there's been more data mining, revealing some stuff. So, the tooltip for the first miner, for the elite specialization, the one that usually says, hey, you can equip a shield as a dragon hunter, you can do this and this and this, was revealed, and as you can see here, it's called Primal Rage, and it reads, you can equip torches, as we know, and use sacrificial skills. This also gives you access to Berserk mode and Berserk bursts. So to hone in on the utility skill types here, sacrificial skills does make sense, as I mentioned earlier about the idea of corruptions with necromancers. Are they specifically going to be corruptions, or are ArenaNet breaking their rule and inventing a new utility skill type so that warriors can maybe sacrifice health and so forth without actually having to do it through conditions? Is that perhaps what's going on here? Or are the sacrificial skills not even the utility skills? Maybe these are related to the primary professional mechanic. So it seems to be some kind of thing we can toggle on. It will last for 8 seconds. It will give us a huge attack speed increase and pulse out both some flat damage and burn damage when we first toggle into it. And perhaps this shows that ArenaNet don't want it to be only condi or only flat damage. Maybe they want it to be possible to do both. Moving on to the next data mine thing. This is Bloody Raw. And again, it looks like a trait to me. Bloody Raw reminds me very much of this image. That shaman data mined to do with the druids a while ago. And perhaps it was never to do with the druids, it was to do with the warrior. Taunt and bleed enemies when you activate Berserk mode. Gain fury for each foe you taunt. So this is going to pull everyone in, obviously put you in a risky situation. Again, we see bleed on there, as well as the capability to then unload a lot of flat damage, presumably through your regular skills. So again, that kind of condi physical damage split. And more taunt as well. We obviously haven't seen too much taunt. I think taunt makes sense on the warrior elite specialization. Kind of this feels like the opposite of Fear Me, which is nice. Obviously the duration's a lot shorter. I don't know why they're still trying to push taunt as a status effect instead of condition. It makes so much more sense as a condition. But yeah, so we got Bloody Raw. And this is, again, when we press our F1 or F2 or F3, whatever. Then we've got Eternal Champion. This is something we heard of a while ago, which was King of Fighting. And this is what gives us our break bar. Again, I think Warrior is so likely to be an elite specialization that gets a break bar. So far, we've only seen the Herald have it, and we've only seen the Tempest have it. It's also interesting to me that there are no break bars on a core profession at all in Guild Wars 2. Break bars are only elite specialization things. But yeah, so this is a break bar. We ignore all crowd control, or it seems like it, but a stun if it's broken, and the stun protection will last for 4 seconds. What is important about this break bar different to the Herald one and the Tempest one? Tempest is locked into overloading while they have their break bar. The Herald is locked into using a shield, like stance, while they use their break bar. This is the first example of a break bar where that character can continue to act as normal for that duration. And then lastly, we have another trait, Savage Instinct, and this is activating Berserk mode breaks stuns. So that seems to heavily influence what the profession mechanic could be. It seems we will be getting some kind of Berserker mode. Whether the sacrificial skills are a part of the Berserker mode, and then we have a separate class of utility skills, is unclear. Maybe they are sacrificial ones, and we'll get regular corruptions on the right-hand side of our skill bar too. I don't see too much else likely. I don't wholly believe they're getting wells, but I think people dismiss the idea of wells a little bit too readily. Considering that both the Tempest and the Reaper got shouts, why could not both the Chronomancer and the Warrior Elite Specialization both get wells? And wells could absolutely play into with whatever they're doing with this torch here. So that is still a possibility. But other stuff, I'm not so sure. I don't see them getting any of the Mesmer stuff. I don't see them really getting any of the Thief stuff. I don't see them getting Venoms. Maybe Survivals. Survivals could be one of the biggest things. If they truly play into this idea that the Warrior is going to get really glassy at the cost of big, damage output. Maybe then they'll say, okay, so you get some survivals to help you maintain that kind of playstyle. But there you go, guys. That's pretty much all we know about the Elite Specialization so far. Obviously, as the week goes by, I'm expecting Wednesday now as well. So, just 2 days. Some extra website will probably get all the juicy details, and we'll talk more about it then. Let me know what you guys think. Where's it angled? What are the utility skills? The profession mechanic? The name? Are you happy with Torch? There's always so much to talk about at the start of a week. Cheers, guys. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.